Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a world so wet and wild it'll make your shower seem like a 5-star spa retreat. Life on a 17th century ship. Forget the majestic sails and romantic sunsets. I'm talking about cramped quarters, suspicious smells, and more scurvy than you can shake a wooden leg at. So before you settle in with a blanket, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. But only if you think I'm as funny as a parrot that learned to tell dad jokes, and drop a comment to let me know where you're tuning in from. After all, it's always the wee hours somewhere. Now dim those lights, crank on a fan for that lovely ship at sea ambience, and find a comfy spot as if you're hunkering down in the lees of a boat, watching out for stray fish and your shipmate's last meal. Let's ponder for a moment. Have you ever thought about how they dealt with hygiene at sea? Did they really eat that suspicious stew? What happened when you ran out of clean socks? Did the captain get really mad? Could you endure a day of hauling ropes with the smell of fish mixed with body odour? And now, congratulations. You've just woken up fresh aboard a 17th century ship. Welcome aboard the SS Bedlam, where your quarters are gloriously cramped. The food is definitely questionable, and you may or may not encounter a mutinous crew before lunch. Welcome aboard the SS Bedlam. It's a glorious morning, if glory means the unfortunate combination of sweat, fish guts, and the gnawing sensation that you've chosen poorly in your life's nautical adventure. You were promised sunlight and salty air, yet what you really got was a hammock strung between two barrels and a crew that smells like they bathed in a barrel of pickles. Let's be honest, it's more like a floating fraternity house than a ship. You roll out of your makeshift bunk, also known as the structural support for a barrel, and stumble upon the deck, fighting your way through an obstacle course of tangled ropes and discarded fish heads. The first thing to hit you is the air, thick with the scent of brine, sweat, and a hint of something you're still trying to identify. It's either the last week's dinner or the crew's collective decision to shun soap entirely. It's a morning ritual that would send any self-respecting hygiene enthusiast running for the nearest lifeboat. The ship's cat, a hulking beast that probably outsizes a few crew members, gives you a look that seems to say, "I'm far too dignified for this nonsense." Seems you're not the only one with better places to be. It's easy to see why sailors adore their feline friends. They doze all day while you toil away, swabbing the deck and hoisting sails, while they lounge around, perfectly content to let the universe drone by like a poorly played sea shanty on repeat. Soon, your fellow crew members join you on deck, all grumbling appetites and unwashed apparel. You can almost hear the gears of confusion whirring away in their heads as they remember what was supposed to be their fulfilling sea life. Instead, they're here with a breakfast worthy of a bad dream, a hodgepodge of whatever was left from last week. Welcome to your culinary delights, ladies and gentlemen. Today's menu features a mysterious brown goo resembling gravy with questionable texture, served alongside tasteless hardtack biscuits that could double as mini weapons in a shipwide food fight. As you brave the slushy goodness, you can't help but wonder, what happened to the bountiful fish feast you've been imagining? What's the deal with hearty stews coming from large magical pots? Instead, you're convinced someone must be attempting to pull off culinary sabotage disguised as a balanced diet at sea. You can practically see the chef cackling to himself in his tiny cabin, revelling in the utter chaos he's baking into every morsel. Collectively, as you all chomp down on your dubious offerings, you reminisce about how sailing was romanticised in tales that depicted brave sailors dining on platters of exotic fruits and roasted meats under the stars. But reality hits hard when you realise your companions are pantomiming an existential crisis while fighting off the urge to gag. Once breakfast is scavenged, it's time to swab the deck, your first real order of business. You're handed a mop that's seen many seasons of sea life, and you can't shake the uneasy feeling that it might have more personality than half the crew. Swabbing the deck feels like the beginning of a Willy Wonka-esque adventure, but with fewer golden tickets and a lot more splinters. You wield your broom like a warrior brandishing their sword, ready to conquer the filthy world of barnacles and fish guts, as you try not to think too hard about what could be lurking just below the surface. The deck itself becomes a cacophony of men shouting into the wind, ropes tangling as if they're playing a perilous game of Twister, channeling all of your hopes and dreams into keeping a steady beat of laughter and commotion. You notice the camaraderie forming, a tangible mix of sweat and ridiculous banter that binds you all together, even when the mood looks scratchy and someone, or several someones, seriously needs to find a bar of soap. Out of the corner of your eye, you catch the captain surveying the commotion and promptly scolding a sailor who has dared to mistakenly toss a shrimp peel overboard. Damn the audacity! Hilarity ensues as he tries to let loose a string of stern commands, which only serves to spur a new round of laughing and joking among the crew, a veritable symphony of low morale punctuating the sunrise. And while the ship may seem like a circus today, you can't help but feel a certain thrill, a wild reminder that you're a part of something larger than yourself, floating on this vessel of oddities, navigating through tempests of laughter and camaraderie, serenaded by the waves. As the morning progresses and the sun climbs higher, leaving behind traces of discomfort and fading fears, you acknowledge this curious new lifestyle may just be the voyage you'd never intended to sign on for. But hey, at least there's humour where you least expect it, and that, believe it or not, might just be the best kind of treasure. Life below deck is a game of contortion where each twist and turn shows just how many sailors can fit onto a tiny wooden boat, like sardines packed in a tin can. Forget personal space. You can practically smell what the guy next to you had for dinner, because surprise, it's probably still on his beard. Those hammocks are suspended from the ceiling like questionable art installations, and yeah, half of them come with free fleas. You curl into your hammock, a process reminiscent of stuffing yourself into an oversized sock, bracing yourself against the slight rocking of the ship. Have you ever noticed the unsettling way your body becomes a slinky when navigating tight spaces? Well, aboard this vessel, you're kind of that slinky continually tangled with the walls and your snoring neighbour. The crew's living quarters double as a storage area for all the essentials. Barrels of provisions, ropes, sails, and that oddly suspicious cargo marked "Do not open until absolutely necessary." Sorry mate, you somehow end up becoming a part of that cabinet of curiosities, stuffed among rotting vegetables that were probably last deemed edible 3 days into the journey. You close your eyes and wish you could levitate. This is clearly the glamorous life of a mariner, you think, for about 5 minutes until, like clockwork, the ship shifts, and you're suddenly hugging a barrel while someone steps on your foot and mutters something that sounds suspiciously like, "Get out of my way, land rat!" Oh, and did I mention the light? Or rather, the lack of it. Artificial lighting hasn't quite made its mark below decks, so getting tasks done at night feels more akin to navigating a mazy cave with only the flickering light from a half-burned candle that could very well set your floormate's laundry ablaze. Most sailors find their way around through a blur of memory and mild panic, hoping they're not about to bump into someone's potato stash or worse, the ship's smelly cat. Yes, there is a ship's cat, of course, because who else would take care of rodent control? You find yourself wondering if he's trapped in a life more luxurious than yours among the crates, sitting perched atop them like a furry king, while the rest of you wallow in makeshift mansions infested with pirates and more existential questions than you can count. And let's not forget about the fresh air. What fresh air? When you finally draw a breath, it's unlike sipping a crisp glass of spring water. No, it's more like inhaling a concentrated blend of sweat, old fish, and that odd body odour mix that could only be described as aged nautical charm. It's like a mysterious perfume that clings to your clothing, elevating your odour profile to sea creature status. You're practically begging for a gust of wind to blow through, but you quickly realise that with wind comes water, and let's face it, you're not keen on a slap from a wave while attempting to locate your one pair of clean socks. As tensions rise due to cramped spaces, boredom and the undercurrent of eldritch fear, you roll into a riveting debate over which of your crewmates has the best sea shanty. Spoiler alert, it's not the chap who insists on singing about Old Man Jenkins and the dreaded Seacrest. For the third time in a row, you'll soon discover that converting to a life of singing isn't going to garner you a promotion, but it might get you a chance to perform your newest hit, Lice, the uninvited guests, at the evening's entertainment while everyone shifts nervously in their hammocks. Amid this calamity, friendships blossom. The shared torment of hammocks and unsavoury meals creates a bond stronger than the ship's hull. You start to root for each other in ways that might not make sense to those untouched by such maritime horrors. You cheer on the sailor who attempts to squeeze into your personal space for a spot on the deck, only to trip over someone's foot and tumble head first into the bucket reserved for fish guts. Sympathetic laughter erupts, echoing through your lung-draped quarters. By now, you've accepted that these cramped quarters come with camaraderie, chaos, and an overwhelming bond of quid pro quo friendship that can only thrive in utter dismay. As you watch your fellow crewmates adapt and thrive in this bizarre landscape, you come to appreciate the art of seafaring, living together, sleeping together, and swatting at fleas together. None of it makes sense, but it's somehow the best disaster you never signed up for. And here you are, surrounded by what feels like a band of shipwrecked strangers turned family, ready to face whatever this aquatic escapade will throw at you next. So embrace this experience, dear sailor. You've made it below deck in the surreal carnival that is life on the open water, where space is tight but spirits soar, and every cramped laugh is worth its weight in ship rum. Breakfast on a 17th century ship means you're treated to a rare gourmet delight called mystery stew. Cue drumroll. Ever wondered what happens when you combine whatever's left at the bottom of a barrel, a few seagull feathers, and a hint of despair? It's like your mother's casserole gone haywire. The crew grimly references it as hearty fare, but it might also be the reason a few sailors mysteriously disappear overboard. As you lift the lid on the pot, the aroma wafts towards you like a cruel reminder of that fishy smell you couldn't get out of your socks for 2 weeks. Congratulations, you've unleashed the ethereal bouquet of ancient, well-worn spices that only a ship full of sailors could somehow agree is appetizing. You'll find that breakfast is not so much about sustenance, but rather a test of one's ability to endure. Platefuls of this enigmatic stew are ladled out, each portion mysteriously sliding across the table like a rogue wave. If you're lucky, you might find a small piece of turnip or potato bobbing among the other unidentifiable bits that may or may not have come from a previous voyage. The cook smiles proudly, as if he were serving a Michelin star meal, while patrons squint at their bowls like modern art connoisseurs trying to decipher a deep metaphor that just isn't there. Now, one might think that diversifying the morning meal could be a possibility, such as fresh bread perhaps. Think again. That loaf you might dream of is as textured as a beaver's backside and just as solid. The ingredients are a colourful blend of whatever grains are left over: oatmeal, barley and sadness. All kneaded together until they've formed a rock-hard hunk that could be used for both nourishment and potential weaponry. You could throw it at a rat, but then you'd have to deal with the tremendous guilt of wielding stale bread like a club and missing your chance at breakfast entirely. And what about drinks, you ask? Coffee, tea, water? Ha! Unless you enjoy the subtle taste of salt water mixed with despair, your best bet is a cup of something that can only be described as grog, a barrel-breached brew that is ostensibly alcoholic, as if someone discarded the last of last week's beer alongside the remnants of your patience. So, breakfast becomes more of a ritualistic endurance test, a nod to the glory days when grains and water didn't play Russian roulette in your belly. As you scrape your bowl and prepare to feign your way through this culinary experience, you overhear delightful snippets of conversation from your shipmates discussing last night's storm. Did somebody lose their socks to the high tide? Or was it their dignity? One fellow won't stop lamenting how he nearly went overboard while trying to catch a seagull for dinner. Yes, at sea, the concept of dinner appears to be nebulous at best. Then there's the gentleman sitting across from you, a proud, towering figure with a beard that's home to what looks suspiciously like a colony of small critters. He casually proclaims, "You know, lads, if you whittle away the excess fat, you can make a lovely stew out of nearly anything, including your own boot." His companions nod sagely, as if this were perhaps a culinary revelation meant to save you from certain doom. Bon appétit. Later, as the sun begins peeking through the mist and promises of a busy day ahead, there's an underlying anxiety among the crew. Did someone mention the likelihood of running out of ship rations? This could spark an existential crisis as you're now mentally calculating how many hours you could survive on mystery stew. Would you want to wrestle another crew member for the last chunk of food? Is there even a possibility to negotiate running the boat aground just to locate a taco truck? The conspiracies about food grow larger than the hull. It's tantalizingly absurd. So welcome to breakfast aboard your floating pickle jar of miscreants. As you digest, not just food, but also the absurdity of it all, ask yourself this: does any meal on dry land compare? Would you trade a decent breakfast burrito for the camaraderie born of Mystery Stew's potential to unite a band of tortured souls? Perhaps not. In the chaos of your breakfast, you find an unexpected camaraderie that will ultimately sustain you through the day ahead. Both the mystery and meals shared, stitched together by laughter, tales of grandiose adventures, and just a sprinkle of culinary dread. So, while others, wisely, opt for continental breakfast on land, here aboard the SS Bedlam, all you can do is embrace the chaos and say, "Here's to Mystery Stew. Cheers." Grab a mug because it's time for grog. Yep, it's not just a pirate cliché. This is what fuels the ship's energy, or lack thereof. Made from a suspicious mix of cheap rum, water, and whatever's left from last week's mystery stew, this delightful concoction is practically the ship's version of coffee. Expect it to wake you up, or lay you low. Either way, it's a step up from thirst, just not by much. Picture this: you're perched on the edge of your hammock, ready for another glorious day of deck duty, when the ship's cook shuffles in with a battered jug and a side-eye meant for a dog that's just eaten a lobster trap. "Grab a mug, lads. Time to greet the day," he barks, like a grumpy oracle. So you fill your mug with a dark, murky liquid that smells like desperation and poor life choices. You take a sip and can't quite tell if it's the sweet elixir of life or the bitter brew of imminent doom. There's a thin film of something that looks like it may have once been a crab claw, but hey, it's got alcohol in it, so toss back your doubts. After all, you did sign up for a life of high adventure, not the Ritz. Once the grog hits your system, you'll join your fellow sailors in raucous morning cheer, or at least as much cheer as a few scruffy-looking men can muster before breakfast. The sea rolls around you, and you feel the delightful warmth of liquid courage bubbling in your belly, preparing you for whatever absurdity comes next. It's like a group of sleep-deprived toddlers on a sugar high, only there are no nap times on this ship. But here's where the beauty of grog truly shines. It may not be fancy, but it bonds you to your shipmates in ways you never imagined. You'll share tales over the frayed edges of your mugs, laughing until the salty sea air threatens to send you overboard. Remember the time old Joe thought he could fish with a cannonball, one of your mates cackles, and suddenly you're all picturing the aftermath. A raggedy old man desperately trying to claim his prize catch while holding onto a boiling kettle of frustration. I swear he convinced himself it would be a new sensation. Next thing you know, he's yelling "fish on," until we all point and inform him that he clearly hooked a stray barrel. But those celebrations come with a price. The more grog consumed, the wilder the stories become, leading to an inevitable dive into the depths of sailor superstitions. You must never drink grog on an empty stomach, one wise seafarer declares, while casting suspicious glances at the food stores below deck as if they'd conspired against him too. That's because nothing clears a crowd faster than the sight of old Gerald sprinting toward the makeshift toilet, comically clutching his stomach like it's a golden trophy worth protecting at all costs. Now, let's talk about the after effects of grog. While its luscious concoction fills you with camaraderie and bravado, it also serves as a reminder that overindulging can lead to becoming an unintentional star performer in the Why Did He Do That show. Imagine emerging from the depths of your drink-induced stupor, only to discover you've mistakenly listed as a pirate, waving a flag made from a tattered piece of your own shirt. To the depths of the ocean with me, you declare, until someone gently pulls your pants back up, the ship's designated pants police trying to maintain the last shreds of decorum, and don't think for a moment that you'll witness the glorious effect of grog without its darker side. Rum has a sneaky habit of creeping up on you. Just when you're feeling invincible and ready to jump into a sword fight, you'll be reminded that those groggy dance moves are actually just a limp shuffle across the unsteady deck, a carousel of missteps that could easily qualify you for a slapstick comedy act. As the ship rocks underfoot, hope that sea legs work more efficiently than they usually do. Watch out for an unexpected lurch. Yet, despite the chaos, there's one unwavering truth. Grog is the true lifeblood of ship life. It brings you together, exposing vulnerabilities and generating an unrelenting bond that could just rival the strongest chain on board. You've gathered stories, made memories, and most importantly, learned how to brace yourself for the inevitable, morning head-thumping reminder that you are aboard the SS Bedlam, where laughter, fear, and grog always flow like an endless tide. Thus, each mug shared becomes less of a drink and more of a salute to surviving the wild waves ahead, the highs and lows, and a dedicated homage to the glorious life of a sailor, whether it's the smell of the ocean or, well, the smell of your fellow crewmates. You're in this absurd adventure together. So raise your mug high and hope the tides treat you kindly. Now that you've filled your belly with that divine breakfast, it's time to swab the deck. Nothing says authentic maritime experience like a warm mop of seawater mixed with, wait for it, something that could be described as oceanic perfume. Picture yourself scrubbing alongside seamen who are already hugging their buckets, not just for stability, mind you, but also as their personal toilets. The moment your sponge hits the wood, you understand that in the world of seafaring, cleanliness isn't next to godliness. It's just an evolutionary step before you get really sick. Imagine the deck before you, a swirling paradise of half-dried fish guts, stray seagull feather remnants, and last week's potato peelings. Oh, the joy! With one hand on your mop and the other trying to fend off the curious rats that have adopted the ship as their personal resort, you bravely embark on the grand adventure of hygiene. Did you ever think scrubbing a flat piece of wood could feel like a battle for survival? It makes you wonder if the ship could enter a cleanliness competition against a landfill, And honestly, you wouldn't bet on the ship's chances. Your fellow sailors are not only experts at cleaning, but they also happen to exhibit the uncanny ability to create a competition out of everything, and finding the longest fishbone among the mess becomes a monumental test of endurance. It's like the Olympics of grime. They're not just scrubbing, they're having philosophical conversations about which part of the ship smells the worst, or placing bets on who will slip and fall in the pile of muck next. Spoiler alert, you win the bet when Old Man Sprog takes a tumble, and suddenly you're grappling with laughter while the smell of his surprise immerses you deeper in the aroma of levity. You turn your attention to the mundane reality of disease brewing in the shadows. Yes, the ship is essentially a floating petri dish of what could only be described as a medical nightmare. The Super Soaker game you're playing with seawater quickly turns into wishing you had some hand sanitizer. But surprise! There's none available. Who needs soap and clean water when you have a barrel of grog and a shared back-scratching session with all your mates? Just wash your hands with that, and you're good to go. Halfway through your vigorous swabbing routine, you start to feel that familiar tickle at the back of your throat. Not from the foul air, but from the sternum churning theory that everyone is seriously sick with something potentially lethal. Oh yes, the crew around you has charming anecdotes about diseases your mother warned you about when you first turned 13. And don't think about asking the ship's medic about it. Just pray they don't try to cure you with the old bleed and pray method. The best part awaits you on deck when the captain calls for a break, only to hand you a delicious treat. A hardtack biscuit. Nice of him, isn't it? That dry brick of flavourless despair, combined with the adrenaline of impending sickness, serves as a delightful reminder that you are far from home, where food doesn't require a 4-week oath to treat it properly. Maybe a bit of water. Good luck. The only water you'll find is from that delightful splash you just made while scrubbing. But don't fear. Your comrades have plenty of stories to fill the time while swabbing. Tales of legendary sea creatures, horrific colds, and near-mortal experiences shared like a fine wine among newly gained shipmates. The banter is merciless, and you have moments of pure laughter despite the conditions being akin to hiding in a dumpster. Yes, just when you think you couldn't possibly get worse, one participant shares a story about plagues that swept through ships, decimating their crews. At least it's not that bad, you mutter, glaring at your suspected swabbed friends with mischievous suspicion. And when your back finally gives in and you drop to the deck in agony, well, guess what? You've just earned a moment of glory as the crew successfully portrays you as the boldest one who's ever swabbed the deck thus far. This may not be the way you envisioned becoming the stuff of legends, but maybe there's something in that, right? By the end of the day, you get the pleasure of feeling accomplished for surviving the maritime version of a mud wrestling contest, all without actually harming any fish or rats. And the ship, well, let's just say it's still afloat, and you and your comrades are awaiting another day of swabbing that deck with a muted sense of pride, because the open sea still holds far greater adventures than clean water and simple hygiene. So, while you contemplate the next challenge that awaits you in this job of swabbing and sickness, turn to your shipmates and share a laugh, because that's the real treasure found in life aboard the SS Bedlam, the ability to navigate the messiest waters of camaraderie and laughter, one smelly task at a time. You'd think the high seas would mean a daily saltwater rinse. Spoiler alert, this is not as refreshing as it sounds. When all you have is a tiny bucket and some cold seawater, it's like bathing with a grueling article in a survival magazine. How to get clean while getting filthy. Let's be honest. The best you can hope for is rinsing the visible sins away to face whatever fate might throw your way next. Now, imagine you're standing on the side of the ship, the salty breeze ruffling your hair while you try to fill your little bucket. The waves are crashing against the ship like they're auditioning for a role in a disaster movie, and that tiny bucket is all you've got for your daily scrub. You might think, hey, this could be refreshing. except that instead of rejuvenating ocean mist, you end up with a face full of salt water, your hair waving like it's auditioning for that new sea shanty musical. Quite the performance, only no one is around to cheer you on. Your shipmates? They're preoccupied trying to outswab one another, which is a different type of madness entirely. So, you've finally filled your bucket, and now it's time to put that cold seawater to good use. You splash it over your body, letting it run down like a truly ungracious fountain. The cold hits you like a slap across the face, and you promptly wonder which moment in life led you to this exact predicament. Is that a seagull squawking at you? Yes. Yes, it is. Even the seagulls are judging your decision to douse yourself in something that would make a fish wince. And what do you wash yourself with? There's no soap, of course. Just the salty depths of the ocean, standing defiantly strong against your freshening efforts. It's like scrubbing your soul clean with a hefty scoop of sadness. Speaking of which, did you notice the ship's diary suggestion? Early morning routine, visage of clarity. As you scrub your skin, that visage of clarity gets replaced with the realization that the soapy lather just isn't happening. You might as well be attempting to do crunches in a sinking canoe. Great in theory, but how the reality hits you when the waves come crashing a little harder. You've probably succeeded in acquiring a faint aroma of fish, barnacles, and yesterday's grog compared to what could technically be deemed clean. You're officially classified as a sea creature. Let's not ignore the inner turmoil of your thoughts. Will I get lice from this sea bath? Perhaps second-degree burns from using seawater? Oh dear, bit of barnacle there. Impressive, but do I want it? Meanwhile, your cabin mates continue with their spirited hygiene wisdom. Just dip yourselves in, mate. Nothing feels fresher. Right. Because if you don't come out with a doggedly determined urge to either laugh or cry, did you even experience it? There's an irony in this ritual of cleaning with an element that's everywhere yet rarely appreciated. You'd think water is water, right? But no, salt water is like that friend who brags endlessly, convincing yourself that the difficulty is worth the prospect of purity, when in reality you're more likely to emerge with a distinct feeling of sticky wool melding onto your skin. Afterwards, don't even dream of a refreshing towel. They exist only in your imagination. You're left to dry off in a persistent wind that could either be soothing or viciously cold. And of course, after your sophisticated saltwater ritual, you're meant to put on a shirt and get back to the grind, hauling ropes, navigating, and cursing at the wind while waiting for it to cooperate. You grab a shirt only to find it's like putting on a second layer of life's disappointment. It's damp, crumpled, and faintly reminiscent of the same mystery stew you swore you'd never eat again. Finally, when did you realise this would be the lifelong adventure of hygiene at sea? A hilarious, desperate dance revolving around saltwater rinse, slightly unwashed clothes, and a sense of tremendous calm that continues to elude you? Embracing filth is the only method for survival, in pursuit of what feels faintly like freshness, only slightly less romantic than previously anticipated. Welcome to sailing, where taking a shower means summoning courage, awkward contortions, and questionable choices that give new meaning to the term crash course. It's all part of the charming lifestyle aboard the SS Bedlam, where every rinse reminds you of life's salty lessons and yawningly comical challenges. Could life be better elsewhere? Sure, but where else would you be hurling yourself against the very essence of nature in search of your first official shower? Did I mention you might still smell like fish? Because you probably will. In this tightly woven web of ship life, your fellow sailors become your family whether you like it or not. Think of it like an unending reality show where tension bubbles like a pot of boiling water. You'll either come to begrudgingly love the slightly deranged cook who thinks he's a chef, or you'll culminate a rivalry with that guy with all the best sailing stories. Because let's face it, life aboard is exhausting when you're always checking your back. After all, nothing says camaraderie like sharing cramped quarters and bodily scents that could knock out a raccoon. Your crew members are a colourful bunch, and you quickly learn that everyone plays a role in this motley flock of sea vagabonds. There's grizzled Greg, the first mate who could probably strangle a kraken with his bare hands, but insists on yelling orders like a mini-admiral. His booming voice echoes through the ship, sounding more like an angry walrus than an experienced sailor. You either respect him out of fear or get continuously berated for your apparent lack of enthusiasm when scaling the rigging. At some point you might catch yourself wishing that the only thing you had to climb was a nice cosy ladder back to your couch. Then there's old man Ginny, who has somehow managed to keep the same bottle of rum tucked away as his prized possession. He insists it's a tail, but really it's clear it has more dust than it has flavour at this point. Rumour has it he only drinks it on special occasions, mostly when it's Tuesday. He spins wild yarns about past voyages and sea monsters that come to life, but at this stage, even the fish are rolling their eyes. If you thought your uncle's fishing stories were tiresome, just wait until you hear old man Ginny go off about the one that got away. Spoiler alert, it's always the same fish. As you get into the daily grind of life on the boat, you find yourself at the mercy of ship's intuition, which many sailors insist must be a spirit living in the hull. That said, it sure seems like the spirit has a dark sense of humour. It will entice you to bond over a shared meal of unidentifiable fish stew, only for you to discover it has a sibling named Mystery Paste. But perhaps what will truly test the bonds of your crew is the famed sea cold. Yes, cold on a ship is a very real enemy. The freezing draft creeping off the waves makes you huddle together like puppies and quickly establishes unspoken alliances, except in the case of Bert, the youngest sailor who seems impervious to all that is good and warm in life. Instead, he insists on wearing shorts and pretending he's a mermaid, while the rest of the crew resembles rather shivery penguins. You find a mix of outrage and camaraderie as you collectively debate the wisdom of letting him swim from the bow when there's an iceberg on the horizon, reminiscent of battles fought in group projects when one brave soul inevitably suggests you roll with the weird. But wait, dear sailor, because no ship is without its whims and quirks. Ahoy, let's not forget the ship's unofficial pecking order. This eclectic version of high school hierarchy means that a couple of seasoned veterans might go out of their way to remind you that your lack of sailing prowess is the reason the ship hasn't turned into a flaming torpedo yet. Half the time, you can't tell if they're being sincere or secretly playing a prank where the prize is genuine respect. A couple of more rounds of grog, and suddenly you all might end up arm wrestling under the stars to determine who's truly sailing deity. When you think you know your crew, however, a twist of fate strikes, often in the form of stormy weather. Remember those bonds forged through collective suffering? They'll be put to the test when the ship starts rocking like a bad karaoke night. A simple task, such as lowering the sails, can become a slapstick routine, with crew members slipping and sliding on spilled grog. In the chaos, rising tensions give way to downright communicative genius. Yes, everyone's yelling at everyone else to get the rope, while simultaneously forgetting which rope is which. Once you've weathered the storm, your bond strengthens. They might have been foes for that brief moment, but now they stand shoulder to shoulder with you against the ocean. Like a shipwrecked version of Survivor, you realise that the challenges faced are enough to forge friendships stronger than steel. As you share stories of those ridiculous moments, no one's getting voted off the island, and you all get home safe, grinning like madmen at the true absurdity of being friends at sea. So congratulations. Your maritime adventure has landed them as both friends and foes, perhaps leaving you longing for the comforts of a land not at the mercy of waves, or, should we say, some less than savoury shipmates. Navigating this life at sea isn't just about the horizon's edge. It's about growing a parallel existence filled with memorable characters that cement thrills, laughs, and enough whiffs of brine to last a lifetime. Now, keep those sea legs steady, because the next port of call could come quicker than you think. Did I mention navigation? You'd assume the crew is equipped with maps and compasses, right? Well, in reality, most sailors operate on a mix of gut feeling and the captain's hastily scribbled directions. Go left at the fishy rock, right when you see the angry seagull. Welcome to navigating the Bermuda Triangle of questionable decision-making. This is the kind of sailing that makes every day seem like a pirate's version of whack-a-mole, because one moment you're barreling toward what looks like land and the next you're trying to dodge a cluster of floating dead fish. Is that a shore or just more of the sea? Who knows? As the crew bumbles around trying to make sense of the captain's latest brilliant manoeuvre, sail into the wind, or something like that, the atmosphere turns mildly chaotic. You can feel the anxiety vibrating through the floorboards as sailors argue over the legitimacy of each randomly assigned mascot guiding the ship. "I think it was the barrel of turnips last time," says a particularly confident mate, possibly forgetting that the turnips sank the ship last month. If you are hoping for some star navigation with an experienced sailor guiding the way, hold your applause. Instead, you have about 2 crew members who are convinced they have a natural connection to the night sky. And when I say natural connection, I deeply mean they can hold their breath underwater longer than anyone else, not that they have the slightest idea what any constellation looks like. So expect heavenly bodies, confused opinions, and an outrageous number of "I swear the North Star was over there" discussions. The tension mounts as those shimmering stars sometimes dim into nothingness, cloaked by clouds thicker than the remnants of last week's mystery stew. "Look out for the North Star," they say with eager intensity. Yet there's more chance finding a squirrel in a shoebox than actually using the stars for guidance. Instead, the ship's steering goes slightly awry, resembling an elaborate game of bumper cars where they aim to collide with as many waves as possible. As a sailor, you quickly find yourself ready to invest in an atlas of schoolyard-style drawings rather than the official map, which never actually seems to match your current location. It's like being in a bizarre scavenger hunt without an actual list. Is that island on the map? How about the one you just saw? Spoiler alert, those were just 2 piles of rocks pretending to be exotic islands. Grab your snack of dubious origin, we might be stuck for a while. Then there's that fateful day during a navigational error where you suddenly find yourself thinking, is that a landmass ahead, or the ocean just playing tricks on our desperate minds? You've reached an awful realization. Navigating by gut feeling, and Captain Clueless isn't exactly foolproof. The crew grows restless, staring at the horizon that seems to mock them. Is that land, or just more endless blue? Got me. You'll hear about 16 times before sunrise. So there you are, heart racing on the edge of thrilling uncertainty and unrelenting seasickness, finding it amusing yet bewildering. Somehow, though, the chaos works out. You manage to land on solid ground, or at least you think you have, because that solid ground looks suspiciously like a glorified heap of seaweed, piled together in a vaguely recognisable shape. But this momentary success becomes bittersweet, as you realise it all may just be another cruel joke from the ocean. Here you thought you were championing navigational prowess, and now you're looking for a secret beach, BBQ stimulating driftwood and seaweed salad, while the crew discusses if anything was ever truly ship-shaped during the last leg of your journey. Arguably, there's a necessary camaraderie among shipmates struggling to find direction together. After all, laughing amid the confusion creates lasting bonds, where you'll recount tales of navigating on a wing and a prayer. So, the next time you want to take to the seas with dreams of pirate greatness, Remember, you're playing a live-action game of guess where we are. It's probably the deep end. And who knows? One day, when you find your footing again, it may just help you discover the joy of steering your ship towards something more secure than the angry seagull. And thus, as you find your way through the waves of confusion and the nautical nonsense surrounding you, the life on board mirrors the unpredictable ebb and flow of existence itself. So, hoist those sails high and prepare to steer your ship, preferably in the right direction. Because out here, amid the laughter and the disarray, a collective failure is the best compass for adventure. The romanticised storms. Only reality isn't a Hollywood blockbuster. Picture your ship shaking like it just got hit with a massive coffee overdose, rigging snapping, sails flapping, and sea spray making you question all life choices. You'd think the crew would be seasoned sailors, but nope, half of them are scuttling round shrieking like a bunch of terrified kittens, and you wonder if they'd survive an angry paper cut. Meanwhile, you, the so-called adventurer, are frantically trying to outrun the reality of living on a glorified bathtub filled with disgruntled crew members and the echoes of your latest questionable choices. As the winds howl outside, seriously, you've never heard an instrument produce such a blend of horror and banjo. You've got to ask yourself, how did you get into this mess? The first drops of rain hit like the universe's chosen weaponry. Ever had cold shards of water smack you in the face when you were least prepared? Welcome to Mother Nature's shower of shame. You clutch the cold, slippery rails, vowing to never leave your landlubber days behind, at least until the next time you decide to chase some romantic, seafaring fantasy that's been fed by more than a few too many grogs. And speaking of grog, now is not the time to be sober when the only steady thing aboard is your imagination. You peer out into the stormy abyss, squinting hard to determine if the murky green water is an angry sea or if it just really likes avocados. Between the waves towering like angry giants peering down at you and the splashes that feel like a tidal wave's enthusiastic applause, you wonder if this ship even has a chance against Poseidon himself. Maybe he's just in a mood today, feeling particularly titanic and in need of some good old chaos. Inside the ship, it's a whole different story. Mayhem erupted like a really bad talent show, with each sailor trying to outdo the other in sheer, pointless heroics. One is trying to secure the sail, while simultaneously yelling instructions in a tongue clearly derived from a combination of gibberish and mutinous frustrations. Another, perhaps confused but well-meaning, has taken it upon himself to lift a cannon, convinced that this will somehow solve all your problems if only you could shoot a hand-drawn map at the storm. It doesn't take a cartographer to see this won't end well. Confusion reigns as one shipmate trips over a barrel filled with who knows what and spills its contents everywhere, a veritable cafeteria of rotten secrets cascading onto the deck. Picture this scene turning into a performance piece no one signed up for, the Great Grog Slip. The once proud swabbers of the ship are now huddled on the ground, trying desperately not to let a slippery floor send them to a watery grave while simultaneously accusing one another of overindulging in the last bottle of questionable rum. The storm rages on, the deck now looking like a post-ganza of spaghetti, slippery and dangerous. You forget about what lies beneath and focus on what's happening right now. There's an impressive amount of teamwork required to avoid turning into fish bait. However, just as the thought of heroic bravery crosses your mind, here comes the captain's furious shout, magnified and echoed through the howling gap of wind. He exclaims something about tightening the sails, making sure to grab hold, which in theory sounds simple, until the high seas remind you that gravity is still a thing, and it has friends. As you stumble and grab the nearest rope in desperation, it's a good tie-up, but your knot-tying skills at this moment rival that of a three-legged squirrel. You reconcile with the wild imagery of battle. The thought floods your mind. In the midst of the chaos and this tempestuous display of nature's might, you remember tales of gallant heroes, daring escapes, and weather-worn sailors who faced storms like this and lived to tell the tale, their voices filled with bravado and, more importantly, actual sandwiches. And then, just as if the universe grew tired of its fun, the storm begins to ease. A hush falls over your chaotic floating circus. The crew, now looking like soggy parades of bedraggled fur, trade astonished glances of disbelief. Did you really just survive? As the waves calm and a rainbow breaks through the ominous clouds, it hits you. What began as a moment of dread culminated into a lesson of resilience and absurdity under unpredictable skies. You suddenly realize that while the world may think life on the waves is nothing but drowsy romances and quiet starlit nights, you've become part of a different story, a hysterical, stormy saga marked by laughter, camaraderie, and an unyielding reminder that sometimes adventure comes with unexpected showers of lunacy. So, as you look out into this fickle expanse of ocean, half fearing the next sudden squall, half reporting on new tales, you realize that you're not just a sailor on these unpredictable waters. You're woven into the very fabric of life at sea, complete with tsunamis of laughter, a sprinkle of chaos, and that ever-present urge to seek out even more ridiculousness on your journey back to solid ground. And maybe beer, you think. Definitely beer. Ever seen cannonballs fired at sea? Spoiler alert, it's not exactly an Olympic sport, and there's always that one poor soul who's convinced they can aim better than any artillery expert. For every triumphant thud of a cannon, there are 10 more that misfire and send a perfectly good cannonball splashing harmlessly into the waves. Welcome to Cannonball 101. No one actually passes. Picture this. As the smell of gunpowder wafts through the air, you stand on a ship rocking back and forth like it's having a midlife crisis. The pirates, sailors, or whatever miscreants are currently crewing this floating beast are hefting massive cannonballs like oversized spaghetti. You're wondering if being blasted away is the most common punishment aboard a ship, or if that's just a daily adventure. Now, you probably think cannon firing involves some sophisticated choreography, like a ballet of seawater and muscles. But the truth is, it looks more like an awkward tug-of-war with someone's cousin who claimed to have been in a few battles. The captain yells commands sounding like he's trying to order a pizza during a thunderstorm. Fire one, load the next. Where's Timmy? Has anyone seen Timmy? Timmy's always somewhere tying himself into a knot with a barrel of gunpowder, blissfully unaware of the chaos surrounding him. And don't even think about the manners or etiquette of cannon usage. On this ship, if you mistakenly fire a cannon at another ship, congratulations. You just started an international incident over a game of who can drop this less heavy object the hardest. Imagine the conversations back at port. So why were you arrested? Oh, merely the standard mix-up of nearly destroying a merchant vessel. No biggie. But don't think for a moment you're getting out of this scot-free. Once the cannon is loaded and aimed, assuming you've managed to aim it at something that isn't one of your own mastheads, you brace for the blast, praying it doesn't take a sailor with it. With a bang that could wake the angriest kraken, the cannon fires, and whether it goes roaring off towards the enemy or splashes into the ocean with a whimper, you feel like you've participated in some grand cosmic joke. Time to reload. That just means dragging bulky cannonballs around like you're preparing for an arm wrestling match with a ship's anchor. As you and your fellow sailors contort your bodies to fit into impossibly tight spaces, the only thing you'll really be boosting is each other's morale, or perhaps your shared desperation. Swab that deck because, warning, cannon fire doesn't discriminate. Blood, bits, and the remnants of morale get splattered across ship walls like a bizarre abstract painting nobody asked for. And then it happens. The cannon misfires. Cue the panic. Onlookers gasp and prepare for imminent disaster. You've raised your eyebrows to the heavens while harbouring a simultaneous praying for safety while trying to appear courageous attitude. The cannonball erupts from one end like popcorn escaping a hot pan, and instead of flying through the air like a majestic, albeit rather rusty bird of prey, it instead shoots out the side, leaving you questioning if Scottish luck has officially run dry. But wait, is that a ship approaching? Gasp! The enemy. Or at least, it's a ship that kind of looks like it belongs to the enemy, a slave to your overly diligent imagination. Suddenly, that half-full barrel of gunpowder and last week's remnants of the mystery stew take on a new meaning as you realise the urgency. Just when you think the battle's afoot, everybody loses their minds about who forgot to bring coffee. Accompanying your friendly cannon disaster is a shrill cry for more grog, because apparently that's the key to victory. So there you are, navigating between cannon fire and near chaos. Somewhere between being fired at and firing off your own shots, you feel strangely alive. The thrill mixes with the bitterness of salt water and regret, and just as you stagger back towards your post, you spot the captain, too busy ranting to be worrying about cannon practice, with grizzled brows and hands waving in animated indignation, more suited to a theatrical performance than anything resembling actual naval warfare. What you truly discover during your time in the Cannonball Circus is that while accuracy may not happen on this ship, entertainment certainly does. You've become a part of something ridiculous and unpredictable, filled with laughter that even the fiercest sea storms can't shake. Seriously, who needs theatre when you've got this raucous show of misadventures aboard the SS Bedlam? And as you take a breath amidst the cannon smoke, you might just find yourself wearing a smile, covered in salt, sooty remnants, and conqueror's blush as you curse your luck for being born in the wrong time period. But hey, what's a little cannon fire among friends? You've truly lived to tell the tale, and that becomes the story worth sharing after all. While the chaos of the sea is all-consuming, there's plenty of downtime and surprisingly entertainment. Gather round for a rousing evening of sailors' shenanigans, featuring a carefully curated set of sea shanties and a few questionable choreographed dance numbers that might just involve everyone's least favourite task: cleaning the barnacles off the hull. That's right, sailors have expertly mixed music and mischief into their daily grind, doing everything from hoisting sails to holding impromptu concerts aboard the ship. It's charming, really, the way they manage to turn tedious chores into an absolute showstopper. Picture yourself there, surrounded by a crew of scrappy individuals with voices that could shatter glass, mostly from bad singing rather than high notes. As they belt out joyous refrains about mermaids, rum and dangerous reefs, you can't help but join in, feet tapping awkwardly as the salty sea spray turns your hair into a luscious mat of wildness. And just when you think you know the lyrics, someone mispronounces plunder as plumber, sending the crowd into a fit of laughter and off-key humming. Of course, the real entertainment is watching the cook trying to juggle fish while the crew takes turns pretending to be swashbuckling pirates. Spoiler alert, he drops the fish, swears loudly, and the next thing you know, there's a slippery plank of jumpy sailors dodging quick footwork from fish fillet fracas. But it gets better. Remember that barnacle scraping chore? Well, tonight, that just happens to be the backdrop for the grand performance of the Barnacle Ballet. You've never seen anything quite like it. One sailor, equipped with more enthusiasm than talent, launches into a pirouette with a knife in hand, only for his other foot to slip on a slick spot, sending him crashing into a pile of rope with the grace of a toppled moose. The crew gasps, but then laughter erupts, because let's be honest, Nothing says sailor solidarity quite like witnessing your shipmate faceplant into a heap of nautical accessories. After their collective belly laughs, the ship's cook stands centre stage, waving a wooden spoon as a microphone while he attempts to win a round of sailor trivia with a complete lack of factual information. "What do you do when you see a whale?" he proclaims boisterously. "You challenge it to a rousing game of chess." The chorus of roars from an audience that you can barely call sober showcases a camaraderie that can only grow in poorly ventilated quarters. As the night slips into the kind of easy camaraderie that can only be found on a floating hovel, tales from the high seas become rich fare. Mystical stories of mermaids who strike deals for hearts, mystical squid that ensure your ships remain wrecked, or that infamous ghost ship said to sail on misty nights, filled with sailors desperately seeking a haircut. Each tale gets more exaggerated, while you sit, wide-eyed and amused, desperately trying to decide if you should be scared or interested in becoming a ghost on maritime adventures. And then, just when you think the entertainment is about to fade, the topic of card games comes up. Forget poker. Sailors aren't just setting the stakes high, they've created pirate poker, where the stakes are literal. Bet with your shoes, your last remaining bit of food, or, if you're particularly desperate, the only clean sock you possess. They gather around, slapping cards down on a wet barrel for a surface and attempting to bluff with exaggerated expressions that often just end with snickers and a whole lot of losing your remaining footwear. Amidst all of this, a subtle realization might strike you. This performing art of survival has turned the ordeal of being at sea into something almost beautiful. The darkness, the unknown, and the struggle have morphed into laughter, music, and tales of bravery, all shapes of light during this murky existence. Perhaps, despite the chaos of life aboard the ship, companionship and merriment are the truest treasures you could ask for in this nautical madness. So, as the sea shanties settle into your bones and your heart swells with the camaraderie of seafaring misfits, bear in mind this. Tales and tunes of the sea might even soften the dread of what's to come. You may be living like a sardine on a rolling can of fish, but you're also part of a chapter in the saga of sailors, where laughter rises above the strongest waves. Just maybe, that's the secret to making the most of life at sea. Not the destination, but the epic yet ridiculous journey together. Now that the entertainment's come to a close, how do you feel about returning to the duties of swabbing that deck? Careful, or you might just end up with another barnacle ballet on your hands. Did you know that 17th century ships were like a travelling petri dish of interesting ailments? Forget the luxury of doctor appointments. Hygiene's overrated when you've got scurvy creeping up on you. Teeth start falling out, rashes proliferate. Guess that's just the price of adventure. You've become the star of a rather dismal reality show called Surviving the High Seas with No Modern Medicine. Sure, many of your fellow sailors might try to hide their ailments with hearty laughter and grog-fueled bravado, but underneath that swagger they're ticking time bombs with gangrenous toes or infections that are cheekily referred to as Old Man Billy's rash. So there you are, trying to survive an average day at sea, when suddenly the ship's doctor, who, to your great astonishment, seems to have more experience setting a broken leg than diagnosing a sore throat, takes an interest in your drooping eyelids and faint pallor. His cure? A blend of weak rum, a splash of seawater, and a pinch of whatever seaweed seems to be closest. Spoiler alert, it doesn't work. The only thing it accomplishes is making you question if you were better off not seeing the funny side of your balding condition when plotting out your new life as a pirate. If scurvy doesn't get you, something else will. You could develop the infamous ship fever, an umbrella term for the collection of nasty little ailments that could make an appearance, like typhus or even smallpox. It's like a surprise party featuring small, confining quarters, no proper ventilation, and a crew that's just as sick but begrudgingly presses on because really, what else do they have going on? Picture this. You're crammed in a wooden box with a dozen ill friends, sharing tales of adventure and illness alike, which is really just their way of competing over who can hog the most part of the hammock, while subtly spreading whatever infection they've caught. And let's not forget the shameful spectre that is the dreaded, very real ship's lice. It's known as a ship's pest control expert to everyone unfortunate enough to be crammed together. One moment you're relishing the speed of the wind in your face, and the next, that unholy itch is reminding you that you've invited a colony of these little critters to set up shop atop your scalp. Picture you and your shipmates, riding the waves, scratching uncontrollably, and communicating in grunts and frustrated squawks, like seafarers going through how-to books on avoiding bug bites. Or more pressing matters, like convincing yourself your life isn't a series of increasingly comical tragedies. Naturally, all of this inevitably leads you to the barber surgeon, who, spoiler alert, doesn't actually know much about gushing wounds. He's a viable option for getting your hair cut, stitching up your knee, and extracting teeth all in one very ineffective appointment. It's like a one-stop shop for men's grooming, only the bills are paid in dignity and the possibility of survival relies on how well he's had his coffee today. Between hacks at your throat and a gleeful shout of, "Aye, matey, hold still," he'll administer first aid with more enthusiasm than skill. As you wrangle with these ailments aboard the ship, you'll discover new and exciting ways to bond with your crew members. There's nothing quite like exchanging sickness stories while inspecting your pest-infested hair or showing off your latest hasty attempt to treat whatever's sprouting on your arm. Oh, you think that's bad? Check out this charm I call the Ballad of the Bumblebee to keep the lice away, offers a cheery sailor, as you stare blankly at him, panicking internally over whether you should follow his advice or flee for shore like a scared rat. In the end, ship life isn't just an adventure. It's an ongoing series of surreal moments that test your sanity and fortitude. With each passing day, every pockmark, skin rash and missing tooth adds to your shipboard resume as you transform into a living testament of how the joy of seafaring can quickly get lost amid the grotesque absurdity of daily existence. You laugh, cry, and scratch your way through to the conclusion that being alive might just be the greatest treasure of all on this high seas misadventure, as toxic as that backwater stew might be. Leaving you with the always comforting thought, it's a good thing you decided to indulge in this journey of a lifetime, because without it, where else would you find true camaraderie among men in rags and the ever-present danger of rotting food? Welcome aboard the most absurd reality show you never signed up for. Scurvy soirees on the 7 seas. Buckle up, shipmate. It's going to be a bumpy ride. The captain proves to be a vital character in this twisted tale. Is he a benevolent keeper of the ship, or a tyrant bent on causing as much chaos as possible? As power dynamics reveal themselves, you can never be sure whether he's going to reward you with extra gruel or send you to the brig for the smallest of infractions. Picture him perched on his weathered wooden chair, adorned with a hat that looks like it survived more storms than anyone aboard. He surveys his crew with one squinty eye as if he's peering into the soul of each sailor, contemplating whether their existence adds value, or if they should simply walk the plank for not scrubbing the deck vigorously enough. You soon learn that his mood swings rival those of the ocean, meaning moments of benevolent brilliance can easily be washed away like a dropped grog barrel. 1 minute, he'll be regaling the crew with stories of naval glory, inspiring you all to seize the day like it's the last coconut at a tropical buffet. The next minute, he's chewing you out for accidentally spilling some boiled cabbage on the ship's deck, as if you just declared war on the entire maritime civilization. Cabbage isn't just food, it's a statement, he seems to declare. Meanwhile, your fellow sailors are trying not to laugh because, let's face it, who really knew cabbage could incite such fury? There's an unspoken hierarchy of fear and respect aboard the ship. The captain may appear as a ruler, but the crew has their own little empires of chaos. And in their ranks flourishes a bizarre camaraderie that the captain may never comprehend. What nonsense could warrant a heartwarming spirit when the threat of being marooned looms over you like a dark cloud? The word mutiny occasionally drifts through conversations when the night's grog runs low, often coupled with conspiratorial whispers, but you'd best believe that no one has the guts to set something in motion. A lot of noise, but little action. As sailors are quick to learn, braving the seas is one thing, but braving the captain is a whole different battleground. You get entangled in the rhythm of the ship, learning the unspoken rules of surviving under this infamous captain. Partnership, and by partnership I mean a constant juggling act, becomes the name of the game. If the captain's in a good mood, you might just find yourself getting an extra helping of the mystery stew. However, the next storm could swing him back into tyrant mode, leaving you longing for the bitter taste of leftover fish heads instead. So what's the good sailor to do? Try to remain in his good graces, of course. As the days pass, you begin to navigate these dynamics like seasoned sailors themselves would. Blood, sweat, and the occasional spit bath. You find yourself tipsy on the notion of precarious alliances, knowing that one poorly executed chore could land you in the hold as punishment, but not before the captain calls for extra lubrication for his ego, of course. The crew members share knowing glances, worried chuckles as they pass around tales of the captain's latest nonsensical outbursts, all while swabbing the deck amid fits of contagious laughter that shimmer like the sunlight on well-scrubbed wood. You discover that it's easier to survive under his command if you keep your head down, while mastering the art of sidelong glances at compadres. You trot the line of flattery, handing over compliments like they're on special as the captain pores over nautical maps. Surely there's nothing quite like praising a man who holds the fate of your life in his calloused hands. "This sailing routes look brilliant, Captain," you chirp, and while it's not a lie, it does feel about as genuine as the captain's depiction of his cooking prowess. Through it all, you can't help but admire the strange equilibrium on the ship where chaos meets camaraderie. And chaos is indeed the price of survival. Whether the captain is more benevolent than tyrannical, every creak of the ship and howl of the wind feels like a cosmic reminder that you are just a passenger on this chaotic ride between camaraderie and treachery. In this topsy-turvy world of shanties and swabbing, you learn quickly. It's not just the captain you're trying to please, but the very unpredictable whims of fate itself in this floating soap opera of life. And there you have it, a truly bizarre existence at sea, wrestling with a captain who seems to embody the embodiment of chaos itself, while simultaneously forging partnerships that bloom and wither under his unpredictable reign. It's enough to make you question whether you signed on for adventure or a well-deserved lesson in the absurdity of maritime life. The real complication comes when creating a grand heist with your fellow miscreants. Expectations are high. The glory of plunder awaits. Unfortunately, your ship isn't exactly pirate grade. Instead of gold and jewels, it's a barrel of questionable fish, a pint of grog, and possibly your own shoe. Charming loot for a lackluster endeavour. Yes, you all dream of tales for the ages, where you return home victorious, laden with treasures, but the only thing currently weighing you down is a barrel full of last week's supper and an unshakable fear that you're going to end up eating that shoe. Let's talk about your first target, a merchant ship. You've spotted one off in the distance, its sails billowing like a white flag of surrender. It's a beautiful sight, drawing closer until you realise it isn't exactly gushing with gold. Oh no, it's the SS Unfortunate Waste, boasting a rich cargo of, wait for it, canned turnips, and several boxes filled with suspiciously wrinkled potatoes. Rumour has it they are actually pirate-grade spuds from the legendary turnip wars of 1642, said to have magical properties. Spoiler alert, when you crack them open, they just smell like a really old sock. So much for bounty! Now there's the matter of boarding said ship. You'd think it would entail some skillful manoeuvring, navigating the waves, and probably a dramatic leap, swords clashing as you arrive like the heroes of old. But reality? It's more like a chaotic stampede. Someone throws the grappling hook too high, and it slides back, knocking a poor sailor off balance and sending him splat into the ocean. You try to sound cool and command your crew, only to trip over your own shoelaces. Remember that shoe you were contemplating dinner with? Yeah, you just lost that battle with those burlap rags. Once you're finally on board, the high seas thrill quickly dissipates. The crew members of SS Unfortunate Waste gaze at you with what can only be described as amusement mixed with complete bewilderment. They're even chuckling, clinking their mugs of what you can only assume is a fermented mystery. Not exactly intimidating, are they? You attempt an intimidating pirate face, but it feels more like a really bad case of indigestion. But it gets better. Turns out that merchant crew isn't entirely devoid of riches. They have a few crates of spice. Yes, spices. Not the kind you find in a broken down cupboard, but exotic flavours that might just make your next meal worth eating. There's cinnamon, a few jars of pepper, and even some herbs. You suddenly envision a future where your porridge doesn't taste like cardboard soaked in questionable seawater. With renewed hope, you declare to your crew, victory shall be ours, and then, inevitably, the whole ambush begins to backfire. Within moments, one of your men accidentally knocks over a crate, spilling a cascade of herbs that look quite lovely scattered across the deck but feel devastatingly slippery underfoot. You attempt to rally your crew, but in a turn of poetic irony, one crew member takes a tumble and inadvertently bumps into his mate, who then collides with another sailor. A chain reaction, like an inexplicable pancake breakfast gone horribly wrong. The scene morphs into a slapstick comedy as sailors slip and slide everywhere, their shouts turning from "look out" to "no" in a chaotic yet whimsical crescendo. Better yet, the merchant crew is laughing now, and it only takes one genius amongst them to suggest a challenge. What if you can catch a turnip? That's all it takes. Suddenly the fight is less about spoils and more about silly antics. You can't help it. You're suddenly playing catch with vegetables flew. It's like the strangest game of dodgeball known to man, and soon the crew of the SS Bedlam has abandoned years of sailing experience and battle tactics to engage in a heated turnip toss with your newfound friends on the merchant ship. As laughter fills the air, you realise that you've inadvertently achieved the impossible. You've plundered joy. The spice trade may have eluded you, but what you've also captured is camaraderie and a memory your crew is sure to be recounting for years. So, when talking about pirate plunder, remember, it's not all about gold and jewels that glimmer in pirate lore. Sometimes it's the unexpected loot, the friendships made, and the ridiculous experiences shared with a rival crew that create the true treasure of the sea. And let's be honest, at the end of the day, who doesn't want to go home with a barrel of canned turnips and a few stories that'll make all your friends green with envy? You might think of yourself as aboard a grand adventure, but welcome to the actual battle aboard, a fight against those beloved ship lice and gnats. Not exactly the fairy tale you pictured. You'll find yourself scratching every 5 minutes and questioning if you're more pest or sailor at this point. Oh, and let's not even get started on the truly horrifying possibilities of what might be residing in those hammocks along with you. Spoiler alert, It's not just salt water or leftover vomit from last night's grog celebration. As you lie suspended in your makeshift nest of itchy wool and damp canvas, you suddenly find out that the ship is more of a 5-star resort for unwanted critters than a glorious maritime escape. Between the creaks of the hull and the gentle sway of the waves, you're introduced to an arrangement of interesting guests who didn't even pay for their passage, uninvited roomies known colloquially as the crew's nightmare. These tiny devils play a delightful game called Tag Your It on your scalp, all while gnats tumble down from the rigging like tiny winged ninjas, ready to pester your eyesight and poke around your ears. It's not long before you realise that personal hygiene is about as rare as finding a treasure chest filled with gold doubloons. You might think that salt water would keep things clean on the high seas, but no, those tiny buggers are renowned for their resilience. You'll wage a relentless war against the constant itchiness, with a combination of what can only be described as a primitive exorcism of sorts. You'll catch yourself furiously slapping at your limbs with the finesse of a deranged octopus, trying desperately to send these pests back to whatever wretched place they came from. And let's talk about what happens when you finally muster the courage to share your grievances with the crew. You'll learn that the men, rugged and hardened by their nautical lifestyles, have their own set of strategies for dealing with these onboard invaders. Spoiler alert, cozying up to the ship's cook for an extra helping of mystery stew does not offer the comfort you'd hope for. Instead, you become part of a circle, one where everyone shares scratching tips, beloved techniques for dealing with the itch, and the best ways to down a pint of grog while suffering from an outbreak of critters. It's a social dynamic that shines a light on one intriguing aspect of ship life. You're all in this together, united by the war against bugs and the bonds of mutual discomfort. As the days roll on, you'll begin to question your own sanity, staring down at your fellow crewmates like you're engaged in a life and death lice competition. To your left, Big Bill is having a convincing scratch-off with some gnats that seem to have taken a particular liking to him. To your right, Scraggle-Tooth Jim is furiously brushing his unkempt beard, half convinced that he's just caught a glimpse of a smaller bug executing a quick tango amid the bristles. Do you join in on the fun? You'll find that unfortunate camaraderie becoming richer by the day. And remember, this isn't personal. It's a lifestyle choice in the realm of rogue sailing. In conversations marked by laughter, you'll swap tales of how one particularly heinous deal gone wrong was annexed by lice, and how it set the captain off to another brawl, one that didn't begin anywhere near the galley, but sure ended with him believing everyone's lice infestation was sabotage aimed against him. Eventually, when the ship's journey comes to its inevitable close, you'll limp ashore with your head held high, despite the outward sign of victory being the new nickname, Lice Magnet. With each little bloodsucker you manage to battle in the stretches of a 17th century life, you learn to embrace a newfound philosophy. Sometimes, the adventure takes on a life of its own. You leave with a few scratched memories and some small trophies in the form of itchy spots to remind you of your battle against those tiny tyrants. So tonight, as you close your eyes and fall into slumber, don't just count sheep. Try counting each gnat you've encountered and reflect on the bizarre yet strangely bonding experience of sharing a room with critters that could probably lead a mutiny of their own, if only they knew how to rally together. Here's to you, brave sailor, and to a life course of itchy sweet memories you'll never quite forget. Let me know when you're ready for the next section. Is there truly a magical allure to the ocean, leading sailors to their whims? You wreak havoc on deck and realise that once you hear the siren singing, you've entered a perilous mystery where climbing to the crow's nest suddenly seems like a bad idea, particularly when you're having visions of lunch. The serenading melodies float down from the rocky cliffs, drifting over the salty breeze like an errant whisper from the octopus king, promising untold treasures and unfathomable adventure. And just like that, your feet feel heavier, your hands itchier, and you start considering the profound life choices that led you to this moment. As you lean precariously against the ship's railing, swaying to the tune of an unseen chorus, you can almost forget the pungent odour of fish mingled with the last week's worth of sailor sweat. Almost, because, my friend, it's nearly lunch, and you now have a series of very visceral choices to make. Will you succumb to these sweet sirens? Will you risk the climb up to where the ropes and wood creak underfoot, all for the sake of a great story? Perhaps you imagine the applause of your crewmates resonating with appreciation as you unleash your own twist on a tale of daring do. Should has to lead your courage, but alas, hangovers and uncertainty often ride shotgun. But then the sun shifts, pulling you back from your fantasy, and you remember there's a thin line between dragon-slaying hero and dumb sailor who took a hilarious dive into the ocean depths. You can practically hear your fellow shipmates laughing at you, the kind of sound that's equal parts joy and desperation. But you're not without your own tricks. Why not just shout back, "With a few inches of grog I could swim in treasure"? However, it's difficult to shout when the threat of deck-splitting laughter rolls through the air after each slip against the wooden floor. The call of the ocean isn't just seductive, it's capricious. Take your first step toward fulfillment, a footloop here, a gripping edge there, but remember that we've all seen the antics of the less fortunate. There's a reason the sails creak ominously. They get the vibe that surprises lurk on the distant horizon. Just an hour ago you thought your biggest concern was not to spill the grog when making a toast, and now you reckon any crew member going overboard is going to ruin the entire myth of manhood aboard as you pretend to swim back up for another go at it. Good luck with that. Yet, here you are, anchored in chaotic, magical intent, straining against systems that transcend mere seawater. Every sailor least expected to follow a ghostly serenade when the wharf was just a guilty memory. The blow of the horn of duty keeps them on course, despite the undeniable pull of that dramatic sea. Is that song yearning to lure you in just a distortion of reality? What if it leads you to a curse? As elements sway you closer and tug symbols toward your fate, an internal voice murmurs optimistically, "What would be worse, drowning or being stuck in a barge with rumours of filth?" With every gentle roll of the tide, you notice your connection to this ruthless expanse of water, the saltiness of the air that lingers on lips, the foam that casts itself against the hull like enthusiastic hands pushing for revival. Yes, it's a siren song, but it's also a lesson in bravery, one that dares you to dance on the edge of faith. You catch glimpses of cheerful dolphins in the distance while listening to the ocean's brushstrokes on the side of the ship. The sky, an endless tapestry, unfolds itself beneath your feet, inviting, beckoning, whispering. Will you follow the allure, or will you drag yourself back down into the ship's depths and endure the uncertainty of this unravelling movement? You breathe deep, filled with ocean air, and you decide one last journey won't hurt, even if it ends in chaos. Trust in the draw of the ocean, and perhaps prepare, because for every ship's song about freedom, there's someone struggling with unruly sails in the haze of that very siren. And while you try to sway along, the sirens softly giggle, perhaps wondering what you will choose next. Chase after them or stay nestled within your wooden enclosure, where dinner awaits with unsuspecting mystery. So you stand tall as the call swirls in your head and begin your perilous climb upward. soldier of the sweet-lured waves and keeper of salty stories. Ah, but isn't that what life is all about? A great story, commercialized chaos, and tiny bits of lunacy encapsulated within the grandeur of the unpredictable sea. Can we talk about the ship's food for a second? The rotating menu of what we could find recipes makes crafting dinner an extreme sport. How many days can you work with dried meats and leftover grog? And don't even ask about the morning gruel, unless you want to take a long, hard look at what could very well be an evolving mould culture. Let's be real. The mess hall is less of a dining room and more of an expression of culinary nightmares, complete with seagulls that have perfected the art of dive bombing for each unguarded hunk of stale bread. Imagine sailors huddled around a splintery table, scanning the daily rations with the same enthusiasm as a crowd at a funeral. Their eyes dart back and forth as they mentally assess the lineup. A chunk of salted fish with the texture of a leather boot, a pile of broken biscuits that even the boat mice turn their noses up at, and mysterious vegetables that somehow keep themselves in a jar. They swear that it's better seasoned with imagination than actual salt, which by the way has mysteriously disappeared along with half the crew's sanity. And then there's the famous hardtack, which, get this, is basically a rock masquerading as food. It's the kind of thing that you can use as a foundation for a tiny house, and still feel guilty about eating. No fancy butter or jam to spread on it here. Instead, you gnaw at it like a goat with a particularly stubborn piece of cardboard, hoping that maybe, just maybe, you'll encounter a hint of flavour buried in there somewhere, possibly resembling a lost dream. You'd think with all that time on the water, you'd develop a taste for fresh fish. But, oh, here's a twist. The fish might be so old it can still tell you recollections of a life spent frolicking in its native stream. So those fishermen among the crew are constantly negotiating the fine line between bringing home the catch of the day and avoiding a mutiny from their shipmates, which, let's face it, might just work together to throw them overboard at the first sign of a rancid stench. Now, you'd hope for a warm cup of something to wash it all down. Here comes the grog again. Imagine a warm, bubbling concoction that's seen more bottoms than the local tavern. It's a mix of water, old rum, some sad-looking spices that would rather return to their jars, and the ever-present mystery ingredient, definitely not ginger ale. The more you drink, the easier it becomes to dismiss the taste like a bad memory. You claim with the bravado of a sailor, a little grog never hurt anybody, and promptly forget about the last 10 hours of gut-wrenching nausea, courtesy of last night's dubious brew. Let's not forget about the rations labelled emergency supplies. Legend has it these boxes were never meant to be opened. They're like the mysterious cabinet in the back of your kitchen, a historical remnant of ancient shipping practices. One whiff and you're caught in an unholy trinity of stale biscuits, some sad pickled cucumbers, and that ever-elusive tin of who knows what. Stewed mystery meat possibly smuggled in as contraband. You could argue that it develops character, but after your 17th meal of it, character sounds suspiciously like a euphemism for impending doom. And for dessert, here's the kicker. You're not getting any. It's as if the ship's cook looked out at the infinite ocean and said, "Dessert? What's that? A luxury?" Perhaps it's a ploy. Perhaps the captain is trying to test your resolve, slowly breaking you down into a whispered tale of culinary fog. But rest assured, if anyone asks about dessert, you just whip out a copy of the Maritime Code and exclaim, "Well, for most of us that's a punishment worthy of the brig." So the next time you munch on dry toast or chew a bit of stale cake, just take a moment to appreciate your modern luxuries. Because trust me, when the call of the sea beckons, the reality of the culinary journey is far less by choice, and more of a collective tragedy rich with boat fumes, humidity, and more leftovers than you'd care to remember. you'll emerge back on land with newfound gratitude, having survived the utter calamity that is shipboard dining, ready to tell tales of glory or dire truths, preferably over a real meal, somewhere anywhere far away from a ship's dank galley. Suddenly life isn't so hilarious anymore. Raising the mainsail becomes a comical disaster, replete with tangled ropes and shouts from all directions. The mad dash to coordinate what feels like a complex dance routine leaves you wondering if you'll end up as the inevitable laughingstock or swept overboard. Picture this. You're clutching a rope as thick as a boa constrictor while being yanked back and forth like the last slice of pizza at a party. The captain's voice booms over the chaos, declaring commands that might as well be in ancient Greek, and you're left praying that muscle memory will kick in, or that the ropes don't decide to tie you into the deck. As you grapple with the mainsail, you realise that the sails themselves are like enormous beasts, yearning to unfurl into the great unknown sky. Unfortunately, those beasts seem to have a vendetta against you. Just as you get one side free, another knot appears from nowhere, as if the ropes are conspiring against your sanity. Ever tried to untangle a fishing line? Now amplify that by 50 and add a few angry sailors who are now utilising their colourful vocabulary alongside your own, and you've captured the essence of this graceful scene. The crew is already at work, one guy frantically waving his arms like a traffic controller in a hurricane, while another is trying to convince a rat scurrying by that it should take a break from being, well, existential. In the bustling chaos, you realise that teamwork is crucial, especially when navigating the slippery floor of the deck, because nothing pairs better with a splintery wood surface than slippery seawater and everyone's collective lack of coordination. Every step is like dancing in heavy boots, and you wonder if they should replace the crew with professional dancers instead. Just then the wind picks up, causing the mast to shudder ominously. It's a wrestling match between man and nature, where nature thinks it's winning. You glance around and see a couple of crew members wrestling with the sails, their faces turning the collective shades of blue, grey and pure terror as the wind catches unexpectedly. It almost feels like you've stumbled into a blooper reel. Forget pirating. You've become part of a slapstick comedy troupe. When the sail finally unfurls with a triumphant whoosh, a sound that could wake the dead, it feels less like a victory and more like dodging a large, furious bird. You can't help but think how this entire operation is reminiscent of cats trying to jump onto a high shelf. There's a lot of flailing, some language not suitable for family gatherings, and glory only when everyone manages to avoid a crash landing. And what's worse, if your sails falter, so does your pirate cred. What's it going to say on your tombstone? Here lies a sailor whose slick moves earned him a face full of seawater. No thank you. You can't just float along wishing for more grog to numb the memory of public embarrassment. No, as the mainsail flaps in victory, albeit unpredictably, you barely keep your footing while simultaneously trying not to burst out laughing. But once that sail is up, the feeling of accomplishment washes over you like the very waves you're navigating. You take a deep breath, allowing a touch of bravado to seep in as you realise that you've successfully climbed to the top of this madcap mountain of nautical nonsense. Whether it be timbered terror or screeching sails, you've now shared in a rite of passage whose real rewards can only be appreciated when you're drenched, exhausted, and still holding onto your rubbery sea legs. So as the ship finally begins to glide with the grace of a majestic sea creature, though it's still slightly croaky, you see another bigger challenge looming ahead. Raising the sails is only the beginning. It's going to take all your tenacity just to stay afloat. But hey, if you can survive the mainsail mayhem, you might just have a shot at conquering this floating adventure after all. Plus, at least the views are fabulous, unless you count that flying fish that's just been dodged inches from your face. And that's the unpredictable beauty of ship life, where hilarity goes to collide with peril like a storm brewing just off the coast. But ultimately, as you stand there soaking in the wet chaos, balancing like it's a new Olympic sport, you can't help but laugh. Because the truth is, this is what adventure looks like. Untamed, ridiculous, and utterly unforgettable. So let the mainsail flap and the water splash. Because after all, you're aboard a vessel of bedlam, and it's the best kind of chaos you could ever ask for. As you ponder this grand adventure, a thought drifts through your mind. Is the thrill worth the endless waves of discomfort? The lure of the yacht life looks great on paper, but reality, it's a whole different story. You may just find yourself yearning for a cosy armchair and a decent meal instead of swabbing fish guts. It's like advertising a vacation in paradise while omitting the fact there's a very active volcano in the background. Certainly sounds exciting, but does it really suit your style? You take a moment to glance around your cramped quarters, a hot mashup of the aromas of sweat, moisture, and unidentifiable sea creature that seems to be muttering under its breath. Sure, there's the allure of adventure in every polished brochure. Sun-drenched days of lounging on deck, evenings filled with laughter among newfound friends, and the whisper of salty air sending thrills down your spine. But somehow, amidst the grumpy crew members who quite evidently forgot what soap is, this fantasy has become a little more elusive than expected. Do you remember the time you almost got thrown overboard competing in a who can hoist the mainsail the fastest contest? That was definitely a highlight. Or how about the moment you ate what the cook called special stew? A concoction that left your stomach bubbling like a cauldron of regret. A false sense of camaraderie permeated as crew members huddled together, all of you participating in this bizarre rite of passage to determine who could hold their lunch the longest. And then there's the weather. When the sun graces you with its shining presence, it feels like a long-lost friend, a robust ally in your quest for adventure. However, storms bring an entirely different energy. The wind howls as if the ocean itself is angry, mocking your attempts at becoming a rugged adventurer. Those idealistic visions you held, the romanticized idea of steering a ship through the waves, suddenly morph into panic as your world is flipped upside down. You clutch a rope, praying it won't snap as the ship dances precariously on the crest of the waves. What a thrill! Or perhaps just a whirlwind disaster. Let's talk about life on a ship for a second. Listen closely, and you'll hear the haunting refrain of the crew singing a sea shanty, their voices raised in solidarity, overshadowed by how they mix up will and will in the lyrics on the daily. Sure, they may be singing about sailing towards treasure and glory, but what you're really looking at is more like muddy sandals, boat sickness, and a poorly timed splatter of fish guts hitting you in the face. Now that's the reality show version of roughing it at sea. Once you've been on deck long enough, you'll start to suspect that the mighty ocean might be more deceptive than enticing. Every crashing wave can't help but say, maybe you should have stayed home sipping cocoa by the fireplace. You glance at crew, members who seem to have adapted to the chaos while you contemplate why you thought sailing was a brilliant idea. They are grinning through their sea-born madness, claiming it builds character, as you stew in the realization that this is definitely not the sunny adventure you signed up for. Maybe the real adventure is the story you'll tell on dry land, like that time you bravely faced the storm instead of running away. Oh, I went on this incredible ocean journey, and let me tell you, the fish had way more personal space than I did. You'll boast to your friends as they sip their Starbucks and look at their perfectly manicured nails. You'll be the hero of the wild story, but secretively, You'll long for an armchair and the sweet, simple life of takeout pizza and a good Netflix binge. And yet, if you're honest with yourself, there's something undeniably exhilarating about floating on water while being tortured in the most entertaining way possible. So, is the thrill worth the discomfort? Perhaps the true value lies not only in the salty air and sun-soaked adventures, but in the vibrant stories and bonds forged among fellow shipmates as you all wrestle with fate and fish guts together. Adventure as an odd way of promoting strange memories that stick with you long after the rigging has been put away and the sails dropped for the last time. At least, you think, while clutching your grog, it makes for a good conversation starter, doesn't it? So as you sit reminiscing about the not-so-glamorous moments aboard the SS Bedlam, you realise maybe the uneven balance of discomfort and thrills is akin to a really weird roller coaster ride. You might not want to do it again anytime soon, but darn it if you didn't enjoy the rush while it lasted. And fear not, there are always superstitions on board to make life even more intriguing. You'll soon learn that your shipmates have more charms than a witch's collection, and that they'd rather toss a wooden shoe overboard than risk bad luck by missing a single sea chant. Because nothing says sensible like believing in good fortune on a pile of planks in the middle of nowhere. These sailors wear their superstitions like a third layer of clothing, tightly wound, impossibly heavy, and constantly chafing at their sanity. You may overhear your captain muttering to the waved patterns on the deck, nervously scrunching the end of an old torn handkerchief. "Touch wood, lads," he'll shout at random intervals, only to quickly realise that the only wood in sight is rotting and infested with worms. A true maritime conundrum, yet don't be fooled. He clings to hope with a dogged determination, reminiscent of a man grasping his last cookie in a room full of starving toddlers. As you settle into life aboard, you might find they avoid some topics like the plague, crocodiles particularly. They say discussing crocodiles leads to heavy seas. Just imagine, you're in the middle of the ocean, and one rogue sailor decides to jabber about the beast, and suddenly, Mother Nature insists on giving everyone a dramatic light show, complete with righteous waves and furious winds. No one wants to be the reason for idolising the crocodile gods. There's enough chaos in life aboard a ship without provoking imaginary reptiles. And let's not even get started on the ominous warning that a single seagull resting on a ship is bad luck. If only those poor, exhausted birds knew they've become the focus of an unending drama. Any time a seagull lands, your fellow sailors will gasp in collective horror, as if you just described the fine points of a tax audit. Instead of chasing them away, the crew has an arsenal of elaborate greetings for these feathery portents, as if chanting, "Welcome to my ship," somehow camouflages their tangible presence. You're convinced this has little effect when at least one seagull takes aim straight for the captain's hat, a near miss that sends half the crew shrieking for cover beneath the hatches. Another delightful superstition involves the ritual of wearing lucky socks. Not just any socks. These are meticulously selected from inside the mother's own sock drawer, known to have witnessed many years of laundry. Everyone believes they bring the best of luck on board. However, since laundry is more of a myth on a ship, you might notice your friends swaying more from the musk coming off their feet than the waves themselves. By the time the wind howls and all else seems lost, your crew members are simultaneously sweating buckets and desperately clutching the pairs of socks they haven't washed since the ship departed. It's a fascinating olfactory experience. As day turns to night, your shipmates will gather, around for rituals that rival late-night infomercials. You'll see candles lit while they recite chants that sound like they've been passed down through generations of sailor gossip. They invoke the spirits of the sea, promising smooth sailing, or at least an entertaining story if things go south. O Neptune, keeper of tides and waves, grant us a wind so fair we don't need to row. They'll scream like hopeful children at camp while trying their best to summon riches from the fathoms below. During particularly rough patches on the ocean, you might catch sight of someone stealthily checking the crystal ball made from the captain's well-loved rum bottle. Just a bit of divination. Is it too much to ask for a smooth ocean? They will lament, as if the rum itself holds secret answers to navigating storms. Sometimes you'll join in the whispers of belief, hoping that a drop of faith in a splashy drink can somehow change fate. By the end of the day, amid all the chaotic tales of myth and lore, you realise superstitions aboard ship may be more of a lifeline to sanity than simply avoiding misfortunes. Each chant recited, every token tossed overboard, all signify hope, even within the impossibly cramped quarters of the SS Bedlam. You might just find that the antics of this ragtag crew, fueled by whimsical beliefs in luck and chance, form the glue holding everyone together as they brave unpredictable tides in the distant horizon. So the next time a shape-shifting seagull circles overhead, stop and think twice. Perhaps it is merely on a reconnaissance mission to gauge the state of your spirits. Or maybe it's just hoping for a hearty meal that doesn't involve mystery stew for once. Does time exist at sea? Honestly, it's more like an illusion. Each day blends into the next, causing you to question how long you've been aboard this floating ASMR machine of despair and desire. The return journey is a slow crawl, taking as long as your crew can stand each other's company. And believe me, they generally can't. It's that magical kind of limbo where hours stretch like a cat on a sunny windowsill, leaving you wondering if you've somehow slipped into a bizarre alternative universe where time went to take a long, leisurely nap. You could swear it was Monday, or possibly last Thanksgiving. As the ship rocks gently with the waves, you find yourself trapped in an endless cycle of meals that taste suspiciously similar. Discussions about the best way to clean barnacles off the hull, spoiler, there's no good way, and collective gripes about Captain Barnacle breath. Is it Tuesday, you ask a fellow sailor who probably passed out last night, wiping sleep from his eyes and wondering if he's still stuck in a dream about his beloved land. The confusion is so pervasive that you can't decide if the horizon is an old friend or an endless tease, pulling you tantalizingly close, then slipping away, like that last piece of pie you just can't seem to reach. And speaking of pie, if only you could remember the taste of something that didn't have a tinge of salted fish and stale bread. Did you miss the last 3 meals? Or were you so disheartened that you silently vowed to never look at another pile of mystery stew? The food on this floating prison is becoming dangerously resembling what one might find in a post-apocalyptic setting, dried out, featuring a mix of scabs and bits you're pretty sure have sprouted some personality of their own. Just as the broth from breakfast begins to haunt your thoughts, you have the delightful realization that you've run out of grog. Perfect! The very essence of your sanity is vanishing along with your beloved beverage. A small yet dangerous dilemma when it's the only thing keeping you afloat, both literally and metaphorically. Your fellow sailors, meanwhile, aren't faring much better. Tensions are building like a balloon on the verge of popping. Each passing wave carries with it snippets of melodrama. Sailors arguing over who failed to tie the mainsail properly, or who remembered to feed the pet rat. Yes, that's right. Somewhere amid the chaos, someone decided to smuggle a rat aboard as a spirit animal, or some nonsense like that. Now, this symbol of luck, or bad hygiene, has put everyone on edge, as every murmur and whisper drifting through the ship threatens to unravel the fragile bonds of camaraderie you cling to. The line between ally and enemy grows thinner with the added element of your suspended sanity. With each uneventful day, time takes on a surreal quality. Waves crash rhythmically, lapping against the wood like an impatient child demanding attention. The repetitive creak of the ship feels like an interlude in the middle of a symphony composed by a sleep-deprived octopus with too many arms and too little coffee. The sound becomes your soundtrack. It seeps into your bones, reminding you that you are, indeed, trapped in the confines of this boat, not unlike a delightful social experiment twisted by endless boredom. Then, one of your crewmates decides now is the perfect moment to host a dare-off, where sailors compete to see who can endure the most absurd tasks. Suddenly, one brave soul is attempting to crow, "The sea is my home," while balancing precariously at the bow. Another is jumping through the fog of days lost and attempting handstands while muttering poetry about barnacles. Yes, barnacles. It's absolutely magnificent in its absurdity, but all you can think is that the sea certainly has a knack for making you lose track of time and transform you into a circus act. As the horizon finally draws near, you try to convince yourself that humanity lies beyond the waves, patiently awaiting your return. You visualize eagerly, but are met with bizarre imaginings of getting off the ship, either as the toast of the town or simply wearing the title of the guy who smuggled a rat. Honestly, both sound equally enticing after weeks of feeling like a sardine packed in disappointment. It's both the sweet promise of landfall and the fierce uncertainty of returning to civilization that keep you afloat as your ship creeps closer to an ambiguous destination. One filled with laughter, companionship, and the inevitable return to life back on solid ground. Let's be real. Stepping off this ship might just feel both like an exhilarating liberation and a jump into an even stranger existence. But as you gaze out at the approaching land, you can't help but reminisce about crew misadventures and shared grog. Because let's face it, nothing bonds a crew like tragedy and terribly dubious culinary experiments. Let's talk about shipwrecks and the salty taste of redemption. Those moments when you think you've pushed the limits of life aboard, until, voila, you wash ashore and head for land like a champagne cork popping out of a bottle. The miraculous shore leave releases you, letting you know the glorious sweetness of a place where shoes are optional and meals aren't just a dubious mystery. Instantly you feel as if you've been reborn, peeling off the layers of fish smell and cholesterol-laden despair. Ah, fresh air. You take a deep breath, and for a fleeting moment, the world smells like piña coladas and coconut sunscreen instead of whatever that grey sludge was back on deck. But let's not kid ourselves. Shipwrecks can be a bit of a mixed bag. Picture yourself bobbing around the ocean, feeling as though you not only survived the tumultuous waves, but also the questionable choices served up in the galley. One minute, your trusty ship is sailing smoothly, and the next it's floundering like a cat in a bathtub, getting tossed around by angry waves and cursed by the gods of nautical bad luck. Maybe you forgot the ship's charm against misfortune, or perhaps you angered a mystical sea creature by stepping on its tail. Either way, there's nothing calm about watching good old SS Bedlam rattle and shake, not knowing whether it would emerge victorious or dissolve into a watery grave. Meanwhile, the shipmates around you are either hurling prayers to the sea gods or hurling their breakfast overboard. Ever been in a disastrous situation with a bunch of sea-hardened men who are used to sailing through storms? That's right. It's like attending a really bad musical where half the cast thinks they're Broadway stars, while the other half is contemplating the virtues of being a plankton instead of a sailor. You could almost write a journal entry about your sailor pals going full-on castaway, minus the palm fronds and strategically placed coconuts. Eventually, as your makeshift ship sinks, or politely sinks beneath the waves, you grab your trusty flotation device, the nearest barrel. Congratulations. You've just traded your meticulously crafted sea legs for the dignity of an improvised life raft, drifting toward an uncertain fate and hoping it leads straight to a beach. And as you bob around hopelessly, clutching your wooden barrel while praying the pirates don't find you on the way, the soft sand begins to form a shimmering mirage on the horizon. Land, sweet land. Ah, sweet, transformative shore leave. It has an aroma all its own. Forget fish. This beach smells like adventure and sunburned freedom. As your feet make contact with terra firma, the sensation is blissful. No more swabbing decks or enduring fishy stew. Instead, you can dig your toes in the sand while feeling vibrant and alive. All those rationed meals aboard have actually prepared you for this moment. You have zero expectations for culinary delight, so when you encounter a street vendor hawking fried dough with questionable fillings, you react like an over-enthusiastic toddler with an ice cream truck. The local cuisine is not just a meal, but a feast for your disgruntled sailor's soul. With every bite of what you can only hope isn't last week's seafood special, it's a celebration, a triumph over bland survival rations. Who knew that eating with strangers at a crowded tavern could feel like sharing secrets with old friends? Wiping crumbs off your chin, you swap liverwurst stories with your shipmates like they're fresh gossip, bonding over shared trauma while embracing the volume of drink you can handle now that land is under your feet. But the freedom does not last, right? You check your pockets and realise that your wallet is somehow lighter than a seagull's feather. Your crew pulled a fast one on you when you weren't looking. The clinking sound of coins is distant, drowned out by the merriment and debauchery that comes with being a deckhand freshly landed on trustworthy soil. You laugh, you may even cry, a testament to how far you've come from the smells of salty fish and sorrow to this bright, raucous haven of life, freedom, and questionable choices. At the end of the day, all those shipwrecks and misadventures at sea have only made the treasure of shore leave all the more glorious, right? You realise there's nothing quite like knowing you've lived to tell the tale, of near-death experiences wrapped around the salty taste of redemption and endless laughter. So here you are on the beach, grateful for your ridiculous adventure, ready to share stories that will leave others amazed and in stitches for years to come. Just don't forget to bring your own fork for that mystery food. After the endless whining of the creaking hull and the odours that had become familiar, the day finally arrives when you might consider the possibility of stepping off your docked vessel. You stagger ashore, bleary-eyed and half-dead, and wonder, did you just survive the adventure of a lifetime, or were you subjected to a floating circus of insanity? With one last breath of that delightful sea breeze, scented with fish guts, sweat, and just a hint of despair, you plant your feet firmly on solid ground. Congratulations, you've successfully transitioned from a life at sea to a life on land. Drifting away from the boat feels like shaking off an overbearing relative you never quite knew to avoid. As you begin to regain your senses, strange sensations wash over you like the tide. Firm ground underfoot, with neither the dip of the bow nor the threat of seasickness to cloak your thoughts. You realise this is not the usual post-voyage bliss. No, this is more like a distant glare at a taco vendor after 3 weeks of ship rations. Blinking in the bright light of the land, you suddenly become excruciatingly aware of your clothing clinging to you with all the grace of a dishevelled bag of potatoes. You look down and see that your tunic, once as white as a freshly bleached sail, now resembles a patchwork quilt after kissing the ocean floor a few too many times. You nearly consider using it as a home decoration piece. Ah, yes, welcome to my abode. Behold, the artfully stained remnants of a long-lost sailor's journey. As you contemplate your ensemble, a reflection dawns. Are your fellow patrons at the market secretly judging the fact that you somehow smell like a combination of old fish, unwashed wool and failure? Someone eyes you suspiciously, possibly mouthing, "Is that a walking shipwreck?" as you realise you have choice words to share both for them and your past. Strangely enough, what fills you with the most hope is the sweet taste of land-based food wafting through the market. Is that actual fruit? You move through the stalls like a hungry ghost drawn to the warmth of bread, the sweet scent of sun-ripened berries, and the unexpected joy of finding crisp lettuce. Your mouth waters at the thought, though you'd probably trade a whole barrel of stale ship biscuits to taste something green that wasn't covered in mould. And then it hits you. What about your captain? The grizzled dictator who once ruled over your days of suffering. Did you imagine shaking hands and thanking him for the dubious lessons learned during the voyage? Or perhaps you fantasize about him trying to commandeer some sort of nautical retirement. You chuckle to yourself, but continue to tread through the market, eyes darting from stall to stall, wondering just how long it'll take before the memories fade. Suddenly, the reality of your pirate-like existence settles in. Your bearing, your limbs, and even your speech have taken on an undeniable swagger. Thank you, self-preservation instinct. You catch a glimpse of others around you, an amusing mix of folks who didn't share your ship, stretched arms, radiant faces, and an energy that clearly must have come from not spending the last month cooped up with grumpy sailors. All around you, people are laughing, sharing tales of their extraordinary days. The glint in their eyes is obvious. They haven't spent their last week with endless arguments about whether the catch of the day should genuinely qualify as food. You suddenly wonder if you can integrate back into this community that hasn't spent their weekends swabbing decks and telling ghost stories about the cursed kraken. But wait, was it so terrible? As you grab a piece of ripe fruit, you pause in thought. Could you actually share tales of camaraderie, mutinies, and the artistic merits of crying while cleaning fish? You've become a shipborne bard, and while your songs may not be winning awards, they come with true authenticity wrapped in a boatload of camaraderie. And as you finally make your way through the bustling crowd, laughter bouncing around like a long-lost memory, you reflect. Perhaps this wild ride wasn't just an exercise in endurance. Perhaps this hard-earned adventure taught you more about resilience, community lessons for survival, and questionable culinary experiments than you ever expected. You survived the high seas with all kinds of sloshing experiences, emotional and putrid, that will now become the stuff of legends that you'll share at dinner parties for years to come. So, there you have it, salty sailor. Your return to the land ushers in a quiet realization. You've survived more than a floating circus. You've come back transformed, ready to laugh about that life at sea, like if it were a purging adventure, one fishy, fantastical moment at a time. You may just be the world's most audacious survivor, ready to embrace your next absurd chapter on solid ground. Now, as you look back at this nautical life, does it really make sense? You'll reflect on the friends you fought seasickness with, the endless meals that ever so lovingly resembled old hay, and the camaraderie that can only form among those who've lived through the loops of adventure that could be mistaken for a poorly written sitcom. Picture it, a motley crew of bedraggled sailors, each one convinced they signed up for an epic tale of glory, only to discover that their reality bordered more on absurdity than heroics. You've gotten to know each other's quirks better than a soap opera cast. Bob, who hoards the last clean sock under his hammock like it's the crown jewels. Or Calvin, the dreamy-eyed lad who swears the last fish was trying to talk back. It's like waiting for the next disaster to unfold. Who will fall overboard next, or who will mistakenly eat the meal you dropped on deck? Completely unsure of what it might be. You've survived storms that felt less like an adventure and more like a twisted initiation ceremony, hoping to ward off the ill winds. At some point, you found yourself convinced that the captain, who's about as organised as a kangaroo on a pogo stick, was simply trying to turn every trip into a Shakespearean tragedy. Each night spent beneath a canopy of stars was overshadowed by your worries about what the morrow would bring. More gruel, another barrel of rancid fish, or the unsettling sound of a crewmate's stomach grumbling like a disgruntled dragon. Who knows? Perhaps you'd be the next to celebrate the ever-elusive fish stew surprise for the third time this week. But perhaps the real magic lies not in the food or the tumultuous weather. Though let's be honest, you'd gladly trade in your worst enemy for a slice of fresh bread. But in the stories spun and the bonds forged, in the creaky stillness of your ship after a chaotic day of hauling up anchors or hunting for phantom treasure, you gather round the communal barrel, or what you've dubbed the drink some odd liquid of the day station. You swap stories about life back on dry land, tales of family, disgruntled goats, and naive romances gone awry. With grog in hand and laughter shared, you realise that despite the hardships, you've genuinely grown fonder of these quirky characters more than you'd expected. Even when they make terrible puns about starfish. I mean, look at them. They always have 5 points. Laughter fills the air, underscoring the ridiculousness of your situation. As days turn into weeks, the motto aboard is simple. If you can't fight the sea, you might as well laugh at it. You find that the true currency of seafaring life is laughter, a mental lifeline to keep buoyancy in the face of waves, both literal and metaphorical. Each time your ship creaks, you brace yourself, half expecting it to crack open and release a torrent of fish guts, but also half hoping it'll just toss you into a new adventure. By embracing the chaos, you realise that finding humour in hellish conditions has become your best survival instinct. The various brushes with death, whether through sickness or near overboard excursions, have taught you that tomorrow is not a guarantee. The next time you walk the windswept deck, surrounded by the salty air and your shallower than average thoughts about, how did I end up here? You come to appreciate life in uncertainty. Empowered by how resilient the crew has become, you see a hint of the absurdity that life offers, both on sea and land. Sure, there's the chance that Captain Squawker might accidentally burn the ship down while trying to steal a fish from underneath the stern, but from where you're standing, it all sounds like fodder for an epic tale to tell. And as you prepare to dock, a wave of nostalgia washes over you. You know that while anyone else would consider you utterly unqualified to return home, what with your odd scars and questionable hunting trophies, you're carrying back stories rich with laughter, camaraderie, and lessons learned. Life on the high seas may have been full of bumps, bruises, and one too many questionable stews, but for all its absurdity, the ship will forever be your home. Whether or not you miss the sinking, swaying chaos is another story, but you're ready to trade the salty air for a clean bed and the promise of warm bread. So raise a mug to the wild, wonderful and wacky world you've just survived. Whether it was the food, the smell, or the endless crankiness of your shipmates, there's truly no mistaking the bonds formed aboard the SS Bedlam, ready to take on life on solid ground. Well, at least for now. Let's see how long it takes before the land legs convince you it's time to sign up for another adventure. Finally, let's pull back and consider the legacy left in the wake of these seafaring excursions. As you settle deeply into the waves of your thoughts, remember that sailing isn't just about moving through water, it's about tales, bonds, and stunningly ridiculous circumstances that you might just want to retell through gin-soaked laughter for the rest of your days. Picture yourself years later, gathered around the pub with your fellow former sailors, regaling one another with exaggerated stories of your time on the high seas. Can you hear it now? Oh, there I was, hanging off the side of the ship, saving a barrel of rum from going overboard, courageously battling a wave that was 3 stories high, all during my last breakfast. It's all about the storytelling. Sailors are the world's original social media influencers, right? Instead of posting pictures of their food, they painted elaborate pictures with their words about the grueling yet humorous challenges of life at sea. You'll hear about the time old Captain McScruff narrowly dodged death while trying to impress the new deckhand with a backflip, which ended in him regretting his life choices and swimming to safety with an audience of amused seagulls. Tales of the infamous bounty, and how a disgruntled crew better suited to pettiness than pirating decided to rebel over missing socks. The underwear kind, not the pirate flag kind, resonate across generations. While spit and vinegar may have made for spectacular tales, don't underestimate the camaraderie formed in those chaos-ridden moments. You battled storms, sickness, and the invasive tendencies of ship rats together. Bonds were formed, not out of shared interests or friendly discussions, but through a shared capacity for suffering in a confined space. Remember when Bill fell overboard after a particularly rowdy game of who can balance the hardest on a barrel? Is not so much a question as it is a sacred obligation to recount the incident until it transforms into a full-blown legend. Let's turn the tides a bit and reflect on what would be deemed retro sailing. You've seen those old-timey illustrations of sailors with full beards and big hats, but what they don't tell you in history books is about the life-saving benefits of beards as breakfast plates. Yes, you heard that right. It was said that a well-groomed beard could serve as both a fishing net and a crumb catcher. Imagine discovering uneaten scraps of bread in the twisty tangles of what many hailed as medieval scruff fame. This could lead to unexpected meals after multiple days of surviving, off what can only be charitably described as week-old porridge. Really puts a new spin on finding a meal in desperate times, doesn't it? And while we're at it, let's not forget the lessons learned while dodging cannonballs and befriending the closest of shipmates. The sheer absurdity of daily ship life gifted you with unparalleled life. Skills, like for example, bartering for rations with a fellow crew member imparting artisanal bread-making techniques passed down through generations. Or finding creative ways to make yourself more breathable in the ship's unyielding heat. Yes, that means considering turning your wool socks into an emergency fan. Moreover, there's the constant battle between levity and survival. Imagine gathering the crew every Friday night, or whenever you can fit into the precarious formation of sailors and grog. Each tale of woe shared elevates as mugs of beer are raised high, topped off with winking nods and bursts of laughter. Ah, remember when we mistook a flying fish for a flying pirate? The look on Bob's face could have launched 1,000 ships, or at least one tiny dinghy. Laughter blurred the lines between survival instincts and absolute absurdity throughout history. So, as you bask in the depths of this ship life reflection, let gratitude wash over you like a wave against the hull. These stories might sound wildly exaggerated, and with the passage of time, you might even redefine what sounds credible. But in chasing horizons, fearlessly battling waves, each sailor wound up leaving behind a legacy infused with humour, camaraderie, and perhaps just a pinch of lunacy. Ideal fodder for retellings in cosy modern bars with just enough warmth to shed the salty memories. After all, it's not just the stories that echo across time, but the raw spirit of adventure, resilience, and survival. You may laugh at the struggle now, but you'll cherish the indelible friendships forged over kitchens where the only thing cooking was the laughter brewed through shared hardships. You might just find yourself celebrating those too, stirring soul-warming stretches of the past infused with humour and joy. For every hearty, harrowing moment at sea left an impression, and ultimately made you who you are today. Let me know when you'd like to continue with the outro.